there are more bad relationships with diet and exercise, more eating disorders in the fitness space than there are outside of the fitness space. Okay, a lot of people who get into fitness as a profession do so because they have an obsession, and oftentimes it's rooted in some kind of insecurity. Now, if they stick to it long enough and they do a good job, eventually they kind of come out of it, and then they're really good at what they do because they understand what it feels like to be very insecure about how they look, and they make really, really good coaches and trainers. But oftentimes, that's what you see. Here's the deal. I'll give you an example. There was a study out of Stanford that showed that having poor relationships with the people around you was as bad for your health as smoking a pack of cigarettes. Okay? So you can be physically fit, lean and muscular, and have good physical performance and still have poor health. You could have poor health with the people around you. You could be obsessed. You could be the kind of person who, because they have to eat perfectly all the time, doesn't go to birthday parties, doesn't hang out with friends, doesn't visit family. Somebody who's utterly obsessed with how they look. That's also not healky. There's also
and you and I know these people firsthand.
Oh yeah. And there's also I could also get away with appearing like the physical ideal because either I abuse drugs or plastic surgery, I over diet or obsess about exercise, but at some point that actually starts to backfire. At some point we start to see not only diminishing returns, but we start to see poor health. But really, okay, so, and the reason why I'm communicating this isn't necessarily to say, look at those people, screw them, but rather don't idolize people simply because of how they look. Now, why is that a mistake? Well, besides the fact that it's not accurate, if we look at exercise and nutrition and value it 100% for how it makes you look, you're never going to develop a good long-term relationship with it. It just won't work. We have to look at all the values that exercise and nutrition provide us and really understand them so we can develop a good long-term balanced relationship. Because one of the problems with just being focused on appearance is that if this is you, then you tend to fall in this category where you're on this diet and you're really strict, and then you fall off, and then you binge and you eat terribly, or you exercise real consistently, and at some point you hate it, and then you stop for 3 months, 6 months, or for years. So if you find yourself having no balance, it's probably or likely because you're only valuing exercise and nutrition for appearance. There's so much more that comes from it. Like let's just look at diet, for example. Your food. I can't tell you how many times I would have a client who would, I would talk to them about their health, and they would say something like, oh yeah, I have heartburn most days, but I take heartburn medication.
Prilosec.
Yeah, but they have no idea that what they're eating could be causing the heartburn, because to them, food is all about does it taste good, or does it taste good and does it make me look fat? Not realizing that it can affect their digestion, how inflamed they are, their energy, how they connect with people. And so they have this very unbalanced or imbalanced relationship. So yeah, it's definitely important to understand that. And are there balanced people in fitness that also look good? Definitely. But sure. That's not the only criteria. The only criteria is not to look a particular way. So be very careful with who you follow and whose advice you take. I would say if I had to develop a kind of a litmus test, is this person, do they have an education in health and fitness? And then are they experienced training lots of people just like you? So if if you're an athlete and you're looking for athletic performance, does this person train a lot of athletes? If you're an everyday average person and you just want to, get fit and healthy, does this person train a lot of people like you? Or do they only train bodybuilders? If they only coach and train bodybuilders, I can promise you this, their advice is going to be very, very not valuable. It will be very unvaluable for the average person because they only know how to communicate to those kinds of people. So pay attention to those things, and that'll help you kind of sift through the noise to find the right kind of information.
What was the inspiration for the resistance training revolution? I want you to share with you had an Instagram post a while back. I want you to share your frustrations with the voice of the medical system at large, and you had touched on it a little bit earlier when we were talking about kind of like treating symptoms instead of dealing with root cause of issues. Some of the advice that comes out of the medical system and that people are following kind of blindly.
Yeah, well, there's a lot. It's easier to treat a symptom. It's also very profitable to do so versus finding a solution for the root cause, because oftentimes the solution for the root cause of an issue is multi-pronged, complex, and requires changes in behavior. So rather than, if I have insomnia and my symptom is I can't sleep very well, it's easier to develop a pill that I can take that knocks me out than it is for me to say, okay, we have to look at your caffeine intake, your stress, your light exposure, your electronic use at night. Like all these different things are just, they require so many changes in behavior.
Yeah.
And people tend to not do those things, and people tend to also want just the pill. So, and it's a market like any other market, so it meets the consumer demand. And so that's the whole deal with it. Now, in regards to exercise, there's a big problem with the health, the medical health community and exercise, mainly because one of the strengths of Western medicine is also its weakness. Like one of the strengths is everything has to be backed by research and science, very, very rigorous study, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials, right? That's a good thing because it's about as objective as it can get. That's about probably the best way to test whether or not something works or not. The problem with it is oftentimes they're behind because they're not able to test certain things, and so their advice is not as good as, let's say, somebody who's got lots and lots of experience with exercise who might have better advice. So I'll give you an example. For decades, the only studies that were done on exercise and health, if you looked up studies that said, how does exercise affect cholesterol or blood pressure or obesity or Alzheimer's, For decades, the only forms of exercise that were studied were cardiovascular exercise. 30 minutes of cardiovascular exercise was typically what they studied. There's a couple reasons for this. One is it's easy to get a hamster or a rat to run on a hamster wheel, so it's easy to see that. So animal studies are easy. But also because other forms of exercise were kind of not as well known and were more relegated to athletic performance. Like there were no studies done on strength training or resistance training for health. All the studies were on athletic performance. Well, more recently, I'd say the last couple decades, but definitely the last 10 years, we're starting to see studies done on strength training and resistance training and health. And what we're finding is what all of us trainers have seen working with people. That in the context of modern life, working with the average person, so the average person has a sedentary life, very busy, but also, of course, not very active, is around very easily accessible, hyper-palatable food. That person who typically probably will never work out more than 2 days a week if we're lucky. So if we're lucky, we might be able to get them to work out a couple days a week. They're not going to do structured exercise every single day. That's a pipe dream. It's not going to happen for the average person. In that context, the studies are now very clear that not only is strength training or resistance training a great form of exercise for health, it's actually superior to other forms of exercise. Let's talk about some of the ones that we never even realized. I would never even have considered strength training to be good at, which is like heart health. I recently had a cardiologist on the podcast who now he does talks around the country, and that's what he does on his talks is he tells other cardiologists, if you can get your patients to exercise, get them to lift weights or get them to do resistance training, which of course you can use body weight or resistance bands, doesn't have to be weights, because the studies are now showing it again to be superior to other forms of exercise. Probably, and this is probably why, is resistance training, the old paradigm that we've been told and sold for so long on obesity, how to solve obesity, part of it was right and part of it was wrong. And the part that was wrong was the exercise portion. And I mean, it looks something like this, right? Like in order to lose weight, you have to create an energy imbalance. You have to take in less calories than you burn, or burn more calories than you take in. When you do that, your body, of course, needs the extra energy, and so it taps into itself, and it burns body fat in order to make that happen, in order to create that energy balance. So that part is true. Now, the part that's not true is that when we look at the energy burn side of the equation, we value exercise for its calorie burning. That's it. What form of exercise burns the most calories? Well, that's the best form of exercise. Nothing could be further from the truth. Of all the values that exercise can provide you, the least important is the calorie burn. Actually, that's the least important value that it can provide you, because the calorie burn not only is very little, even with hard cardio, it's not that much, but also because the body does a phenomenal job of adapting to that calorie burn through slowing down its metabolism, or in the example of cardio exercise, your body will actually lose muscle. It'll pare muscle down to slow your metabolism down. Cardio doesn't require much strength. Your body tries to become more efficient at cardio, and it does this by reducing muscle mass. In fact, studies will show that about roughly half of the weight that's lost when cardio is the main form of exercise is muscle.
Lean muscle mass.
Yeah, so you end up losing 10 pounds, but 5 of it is muscle. So you end up with the same body fat percentage, you're just smaller. So you're smaller, slower metabolism, same flabbiness version of yourself. And that's because, again, we've been looking at exercise and saying, how many calories does it burn? And, if it burns a lot of calories, it's very valuable. And they still sell exercise this way. Burns tons of calories. Here's a cardio machine that burns the most calories. That's the wrong thing to look at. That is literally the least valuable thing. The most valuable thing to look at with exercise is, how does it get my body to adapt? And then what does that mean? What does that adaptation mean? Now, when we look at strength training or resistance training, and I want to be very clear, when I say strength training, resistance training, which means you can use weights, machines, bands, or body weight, it's done in a deliberate way to build strength and muscle. The reason why I have to say that is because you can grab a pair of dumbbells and do a bunch of circuit training, which is essentially the same thing as cardio. So even though using weights, you're not doing what I'm talking about, which is resistance training or strength training with these particular goals. When you do strength training as part of that formula, the adaptations you're asking your body to embark on are to build strength, build muscle. That's the main adaptation, right? The side effect of that is a faster metabolism, is a body that burns more calories all the time on its own. So I'm literally teaching my body to burn more calories rather than having to burn the calories manually myself through structured and scheduled exercise, which eventually loses its value as my body starts to adapt. So what does it look like when you do diet and cardio versus diet and resistance training? Diet and cardio results in initial weight loss, which, like I said earlier, is a good chunk of its lean body mass. And then you plateau real hard. Everybody knows that this is what they do, right? I'm going to go running, and I'm going to start cutting my calories. And they lose 10 pounds right away. And then that's it, nothing else. So now they think, well, okay, I guess I got to run more, or I got to cut my calories even more. And then maybe they lose a little bit more weight, and then they're stuck again. And it's like, I got to do more. And eventually obviously you can see how unsustainable this is.